everyone, it's Miss Rossi. Today we are going to be creating some value cubes. What you will be needing today is your value cube paper from your art folder. This is just a white piece of paper, so if you don't have this one in your folder, any white paper will work. You can take your label off because we don't need that anymore. We're also going to need a pencil and something to color with. When we're coloring today, we are going to be showing a value scale. So you want to pick something that you can color with where you have a lot of different versions of the same color. So I have some crayons here where I have a regular blue, I have cornflower, and navy blue, and midnight blue. So I have some really dark, some regular tone blues, and a really light blue that I'm going to use. You can pick whatever color you want. You just want to make sure you have 4 tones of that color. One very light, one in the middle, and then some that are a little bit darker. So on our paper, we are going to draw a cube, and then we are going to color it in to show different values. To start, in the center of my paper, I am going to draw a straight line that is just going up and down vertically. From my straight line, I am going to draw a diagonal line that is going up towards the side of my page. And I am going to draw another one going in the opposite direction. You want them to be roughly the same length, but it's okay if it's not perfect. If you want it to be perfect, you can always use a ruler to do this to make sure your lines are perfectly straight. Now at the bottom, I am going to draw another diagonal line that I want to be parallel to this one. I want them to be going in the same direction at the same angle. So if they went on forever, they would never touch. I also want it to be roughly the same length. As long as it is close, it is fine. Then I am going to draw that same line that we have at the top down here at the bottom, again making it parallel. So it is going in that same direction and the same angle as best as I can. I'm going to connect these lines with a straight line. Now I want to make sure my line is as straight as I can make it. You don't want to make it crooked just by looking at your parallel lines that you drew. It's easiest if you try and line it up with the edge of your paper and make sure that those are in line as best as they can be. Going to do the same thing on this side, another straight vertical line. I find it's easiest to kind of sketch it in there and then erase until it looks pretty straight. That looks good. So these are the 2 sides of our cube. We are not going to be able to see the bottom of our cube from the way that we are looking at it, but we are going to be able to see the top. I'm going to complete this square shape to make the top of my cube. So I want to draw a line from this corner that is again parallel with this line. So it is going to kind of go towards that side of my paper a little bit on a diagonal. And then I'm going to make this line parallel to this one. So again, we're going to get another angled line to connect those corners. You should end up with a pretty equal looking cube. If it's not perfect, that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now we're going to add a shadow on our cube. To create our shadow, we are going to draw from this diagonal line, just extending it out a bit. You can decide how long you want your shadow to be. Mine's going to be a little bit longer than my cube is. And then we're also going to extend a parallel line to this one from this corner to make the other half of our shadow. And then one final parallel line that is the same as this bottom one up here to close off our shadow. Yours might go off the page a little bit depending on where you put it on your paper. That is okay. And depending how big you make it. I like to turn my paper so I can see that angle a little bit better. There we go, that looks good. So now I have my cube and I have my shadow. And now the last thing I'm going to draw with my pencil is just a line to separate the ground. Right now our cube is kind of floating in space. So we want a line that is just going to attach it to some type of floor or table. So just a straight line that is horizontal, connecting to both edges of our paper and jumping over our cube. All right, now our cube is drawn. We want to assign different values to each part of our cube. Now our light is going to be coming from this side of our paper. So you can imagine that your light is over here. You don't have to draw this, but just so we know where it is coming from. The top half of our cube, since our light is coming from a top-down angle, is going to be the lightest. So it is going to be our lightest shade. I'm going to put a number 1. So we know that that is going to be the lightest section. The next section that is going to be a little bit darker would be this one. The light is still hitting it a bit, but not as much as it's hitting the top. So our 2 section is going to be a little bit darker than our 1. Then we have our third section, which is the back of our cube. It might be getting a little bit of light. So it is going to be lighter than our darkest area, but it is going to be way darker than our top. That is getting all of the light, and our side, which is getting a little bit of light. And then our darkest area is going to be our table, because there is no light hitting this area where we have our shadow on the table, because our cube is blocking all of the light from hitting that point. Now we also have kind of like our ground area and our background, which we are going to save until the end. And now we can focus on coloring in the sections of our box. So I'm going to start with number 1. I'm going to take my lightest blue crayon, which I am using Cornflower as my lightest blue. And I am just going to fill in that top section of my box. So just coloring nice and neatly back and forth with whatever your lightest color is to fill in this area. There we go. Now I'm going to move on to my number 2 section. I can erase that number. And then I'm going to fill in this section of my cube with a color that is a little bit darker than my top. So I'm going to be using regular blue here because it is a little bit darker than the color I used first, but it's not as dark as my other 2 colors. So this is going to be a color that is darker than the one that I just used, but not my darkest. I'm going to be using navy blue for this section because it is a little bit darker than my original blue that I put in my number 2 space, but it is not as dark as my number 4 that I'm going to use. And then in my last number 4 section, I am using Midnight Blue. It is my darkest blue that I have here. And I am just going to fill in that shadow section that I have left. And if I really want to darken it, I can even go right over the top with a little bit of black and kind of blend them together, just so I can really see some different values here. So I'm just going lightly over the top of my number 4 section with a black crayon, and then I'm going to go back over it with my blue that I started with to blend those together. And there we go, we have my cube mostly done. The only thing I have left is the ground and that top section. I'm going to erase that light that I drew because now we can really see the form and shape of our cube a lot better now that we've shaded it in with values to match the lighting of the space. So now I'm going to pick two different colors to do my ground and my wall. So with my wall color, I want it to be just a little bit darker than the color I used on the top. I'm going to imagine that this is a very light area. So again, we want something that is a little bit darker than our lightest, but not as dark as our number 2 section that we used. I'm going to see what other color crayons I have here. So I have a cerulean here that I'm going to use as this top section, and it is a little bit darker than my number 1, which you can see, but it is not as dark as my number 2. And I'm just going to carry this all the way down to that horizontal line that I drew. There we go, and then my ground is going to be a color that is a little bit darker than my cerulean. I am going to use this color, which is called Pacific Blue, to just fill that rest of that space in. So this color is darker than our second blue a little bit. This one's a little bit greener, which is okay. And it is definitely darker than the color I had up on the wall. So that is what is most important. But it is not as dark as our shadow color. We want to make sure that the shadow we drew, that 4 space, is always the darkest one on our picture. There we go, and that is my value cube all finished. So we can see all of our different values that we use to make up our cube, to show the shadows and the highlights, to give our cube more form, to make it look like it is 3-dimensional on our paper, and to show that it is taking up space. We are also successfully able to show a light source on our picture while using all monochrome colors, meaning we are using all values from the same color, all of the lights and darks on there. Once you're done with your picture, you can upload a photo or video of it on my Canvas page. I can't wait to see all the values you guys were able to create. Try your best, have fun, and get creative, and I'll see you soon. Bye!